What people get confused with is what's the priority, right? So if the priority is me, if that's how they feel, then it's not the business, right? The choices, the decisions they make are not going to be the best for the business. It's really interesting to think about, like, wow, do I want to go out and PR myself, or do I want to PR my business and support that through myself? And it really is about understanding the difference. And I think a lot of businesses fail because people are making decisions based on their own priorities and not what blossoms the business. I mean, you have to think about a business like a living organism, right? Kind of like a bonsai tree, right? Where it's growing and you got to clip it and steer it and let it continue to grow. Each of your employees, each of your staff, your leadership, they have to grow and blossom to go beyond the obvious of what they're capable of doing.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today we're going to talk about leadership, but a very interesting aspect of it, leading without an ego. Now, it's quite common for many founders and CEOs who have built something really successful to have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder and have that ego that comes along with them. But I'm going to urge you to notice it and be willing to let it go. It's not necessary in my perspective, and it actually can get in the way. So leading without an ego is our topic. Our special guest today is Gary Mittman, CEO of KERV Interactive. We also have with us the CPO there, Andrea Fenster, and we talk about this leading without an ego and why that's such an important aspect to the growth of your company, what it really means and how you can recognize it. We talk about the value of transparency and all of the things that you need in order to understand this leading without an ego a little bit better. Because the real goal here isn't just for the founders to lead without an ego, it's for everyone to understand that ego gets in the way of leadership and of communication and of connection. And so that's what we unpack in today's interview. My job is to be an executive coach to amazing, brilliant, ambitious leaders. I help them and their teams align more deeply, make some transformations, identify their blind spots, you name it. I've had some experience with it, been doing this over 10 years. We also have leadership development where we actually take your managers and coach them, train them, facilitate different conversations and new ways of thinking that allow them to be more confident, to be more effective in their communication, and to hold people more accountable. If those are things that you're really interested in as your company is scaling and you're listening into this, I would urge you to go to genehammett.com. Let's schedule a call so that you can get a feel for the work we're doing. I'm going to add value to this. I've been doing this for 10 years. I 100% know that if we sat down and talked about your business, that I give you insight and value that you don't have today. As long as you want to keep growing and do that, it's a perfect fit for you. So just go to genehammett.com and schedule your call. Now, here's the interview with Gary and Andi. Hello, Gary and Andi. How are you?
Good. Nice to be with you, Gene.
We're very excited to be with you here today, Gene. Thank you.
Well, we're going to dive into an interesting topic around transparency and leading without an ego and some other areas that have really made a profound impact on your company. But I'd love just to get a little introduction about KERV Interactive.
Sure, no problem. So KERV is a company I started with my partner, Dan Bienenfeld, about 6.5 years ago. The whole core of the business was around a patent for artificial intelligence in identifying objects by their pixel edge within a video for the purpose of information or linking out for transaction. So back then, we were very clear that in the world of streaming video, subscription fatigue would set in. And here we are now seeing Netflix needing AVOD, ads on video, ads on demand. And everybody's now stuck with the interstitial model from the 1950s. And we believe that that's not the way to go. We see the world of streaming revenue becoming in-show monetization, meaning it's a user at the seat at their home with a remote. They hit pause. They can understand all the objects that are within that scene. They can scroll them left or right, select one, learn more, and either click to purchase it right there or use a QR code for a second device. And we're seeing a lot of success with that across many partnerships that we have. But the world of artificial intelligence and video object intelligence is really becoming a highly recognized component. At CES this year, AI was like water. It was the word that everybody was asking for. So it's pretty cool to be six years ahead of the curve here and building out what the market now is finally catching up to.
Well, I'm glad you gave us that insight. One of the biggest crazes I've seen in the entrepreneurial world is this Chat GPT or OpenAI, and you guys were ahead of the curve because I'm sure you've been introduced to what's going on there. My question for you before we jump into our real topic today around transparency and leading without an ego is, where do you see it going over the next 3 years? And you can look at it from a video perspective. Will we be at a place where you described in 3 years?
We're there now, not just in 3 years.
So where will we be in 3 years?
It's adoption that really is the key. So what's interesting is that Google, when it first started, as an example, people were doing broad keywords. So they were buying the word hotel, right? And then as it expanded, people understood, oh, I could buy Hilton, Marriott, Maui, Cabo. They can be very narrow, right? So in the world of video advertising, it's been broad, right? So all the ads have been very blanketed by concepts of who the demographic is. But with KERV and the in-show capability, we do a video analysis. So we can analyze the show like the natural eye, identify everything from logos, people, sentiment, location, all kinds of stuff, including objects. So we can take the objects, correlate them against product catalogs, and now make a shoppable experience. So you're watching that Beyonce video, you can pause it and buy those shoes, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where it's going. And adoption is the next level, which we are now starting with some very large networks and other, I can't say where, but very large properties that we're growing into who are adopting this quickly. And it's the consumer, I think, who's going to drive the success of it.
Are you an Inc. 5000 CEO looking for a unique experience? My hope is that you want to take your business to the next level. You want to gather with other Inc. 5000 CEOs, which just isn't available in most of the peer groups that you're probably able to connect with. But when we get together, it's an intimate group of people that are growing their businesses. We're learning from each other about strategy, about execution, leadership, culture, and all things growth. Plus, we actually designed this to have deep conversations to get to the real issues so that you can really grow your business. And we do something fun. We take time to race Porsche 911s. You'll be paired with a professional driver. It'll be something that you can do that's very different than you've ever done before. Join us for this event. It's invite only, but find out more details at genehammett.com/events. I want to dive into our core topic today, and I'm going to bring Andi into this. Being the CPO of a company that's around 85 employees, that's not rare. That's not the traditional title for a company this small, but it carries a big weight. What is it you actually do as a CPO of this fast growing company?
So the more interesting piece of that, it's not what I do as the CPO. It's why I was brought in as the CPO, if you don't mind me answering that piece. I was asked by Gary and brought to his attention by the CFO who I had worked with before to work with coaching the leadership team, because we had a very high functioning team that was going to be moving from, at the tipping point, right? Moving from, in their minds, being a startup to really becoming this small and quickly growing company. So there was a very real opportunity to start to think about how to show up differently. And I know you are very well aware of the what got us here won't get us there concept, right? Right. So Gary was very clear that, what had gotten them to that point and the growth that they had, and then the experience, and I'll let him talk about the experience that they had in sales the past year, how that was going to change and how people needed to start to behave differently. So when I began to coach the team, we were making great strides. And then one day, Gary simply said to me, we're going to be growing quickly. And one of the reasons I hired you as a coach is because you're not just a coach, you have this background in HR. So I would love for you to come on board as our chief people officer. And I said, Gary, I love to build. So what I have done in my career, and I've been fortunate to work for some major brands, Walt Disney Company, Sony, et cetera. I would love to, help this team really scale. And when we say scale, we are scaling very quickly. I joined in full-time November timeframe. And Gary, how many positions have we added since November?
30.
Yeah. So, and our headcount for growth for 2023, we're looking at probably another 60 to 80 positions.
Probably,
So,
depending. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, coming on board was really to support the team that exists in starting to show up differently. And the whole piece about, transparency, that started with something that over the years I've learned, which is in order to build true connection, you need to start at transparency. So I started speaking in the following way: transparency, communication, consistency, clarity, and connection. That was a messaging that I started to use with each individual. And the messaging is how we are working across the company to really ensure that we are focusing as a tight team, to really ensure that we, as we grow, are not losing the connections that a smaller team has. To think about how and what transparency is for us. Transparency of what, right? So for example, this morning we had an all hands to make sure that everyone in the company knew what had transpired last week at the CES, not making assumptions, but taking the time to educate in order to build that internal excitement, in order to ensure that there wasn't any sort of confusion, and to really showcase that the reason we were so successful was because it was about every single person on that team showing up at their very best and supporting each other. I am so truly in love with this team because I get to work, and this is not I'm plugging Gary here, but this is the first time in my career, and I say this very honestly, that I'm working for a leader who isn't driving with ego. I've worked for many, many, many startups, and I've for 15 years gone in and out of companies to consult. And this is the first time that I feel like I'm working with someone who's like, yeah, you know what? Tell me what to do. Show me what to do. I have these questions. How do I do the following? So it's a breath of fresh air. And I share all this with you, Gene, because I know you as a coach, you're looking for individuals who are highly coachable. And I feel so blessed to have found that.
Well, I appreciate the context around the role of CPO, and it went a lot deeper than I thought. I want to just really highlight this thing, and either one of you can answer this question. I'm not going to direct it any way, but why does ego get in the way of leadership?
Actually, let me take that. It's what people get confused with is what's the priority, right? So if the priority is me, if that's how they feel, then it's not the business, right? The choices, the decisions they make are not going to be the best for the business. It's really interesting to think about, like, wow, do I want to go out and PR myself, or do I want to PR my business and support that through myself? And it really is about understanding the difference. And I think a lot of businesses fail because people are making decisions based on their own priorities and not what blossoms the business. I mean, you have to think about a business like a living organism, right? Kind of like a bonsai tree, right? Where it's growing and you got to clip it and steer it and let it continue to grow. Each of your employees, each of your staff, your leadership, they have to grow and blossom to go beyond the obvious of what they're capable of doing. And I think it's a leader's job to open that window, to let them do it. And the people who make choices based on their own egos are not going to do good for the business. They're going to do good for themselves. They're even going to harm their staff and their reports because they're going to be making choices around what makes them look good, or I need to take credit for this. That's the ego part of it. So if people can strip that away and can work to really what is the priority of the business, I think that's a big win.
Now, Gary just said something really interesting. What is the priority? The question there. What that really means, and it really is a good question, is for you to ask yourself, are you the priority or is the company the priority? And if you're the priority, your decisions will be quite different. Maybe it's ego speaking, maybe it comes from some other place, but if you're optimizing for you and you're prioritizing you, you're going to get a different result. Now, if you're looking at the company and you're looking at long-term, you're looking at real adding value and scaling to this next level as it relates to people and culture and all things necessary for you to scale to that level, You want to make sure that you continuously ask yourself that question and be honest with yourself. That's the hardest part, being honest about what is the priority and what are you optimizing for. I would just remind you of this as you move forward, listen to this interview, and think about what you're doing as a leader. Back to Gary and Andi. I've got to ask Andi the quick thing. What would you add to that?
I would add that it takes a lot to get to that point of understanding. So I know that this is a very public podcast, and I know that everyone's on their journey. I worked with individuals that were brilliant, and they weren't yet in a space and place of understanding that they had to park the ego. And I watched how that derailed them. So I think anyone, first of all, who is in a chief leadership role should really consider, and this is me plugging coaching for the very specific reason that coaches are really good at going, here's a mirror and here's what I'm seeing, and your ego's showing up and you're getting in your own way and you're going to blow up your company. And that's what I have to add.
Leading without an ego, I would say, is not easy. It's necessary. Where did you guys begin? I know you probably brought into this, Gary, that you didn't have the ego that comes with this role typically. But where did you guys really work on making that a central part of your company?
So a little background. I built and sold a couple of companies. My last one, I made a huge mistake. I sold it. It did very well. But the mistake was I believed I needed a CEO to come in addition to me. So I brought in a guy who had a huge ego and didn't understand the business really well. And he steered it poorly. And it made me realize that it's not about ego, about me or that person. It's about understanding the market and the business and growing it. And I think that's the key. I mean, you're going to blossom a business much like a farmer blossoms his fields. His ego is that it worked, not anything else. And I think that's the key with growing a business. Did it succeed because your ego was there, or did it succeed because you put the right parts of the puzzle in place, the right people in the right jobs, made the right choices of product and distribution, understand your TAM, understand the market, understand your pricing, all the different variables. Those are the components that go to facilitating something without having ego, but more about the business itself.
Now, when I think about an organization your size, having a CPO, having coaching internal to this, I'm kind of interested in how deep does this go, and how do you guys work with this? How would you guys describe the coaching that you guys offer across the company?
So I was brought in to focus on the senior layer. And what I was very pleasantly surprised and continue to be just in awe of is we have a VP, and I did choose to take her from director to VP because I think optics in HR are really important. We have a VP who is phenomenal at interacting and coaching that junior level to mid-level, and she does a phenomenal job and really enjoys it. So it allows for me to focus my time on the senior level and to really focus on the sales component of this organization, which at the end of the day, the pillars are technology, right? We have a phenomenal technology, and then that technology has to be sold. And in order to support what is sold, we then have the operation side. So we are experiencing that kind of growth where we need all hands on sales. And that's how I am spending my time. And I get the support of the VP spending her time focusing on operations and working with the tech team.
It's interesting you describe it like that, because I'm thinking about some of my clients where it starts out with the executive level, or maybe even the founder sometime, then to the executive level, and then it's sales. I get it, because we made a huge impact this past year just by a small dose of coaching in the right place at the right time with these sales professionals to unlock just something special. But then it goes to the next level. And if you really understand the value of this, you're coaching, managers, first-time managers, you're coaching people to really lift up above. Are you guys following certain curriculum, or is it just sort of coaching inside these roles for these other levels?
So I've been following intuition. Getting to know these individuals is really important, and the pace of this business, because we are, in the world of marketing and advertising and technology, it is so fast paced. To try and apply a formula right now isn't the time. It didn't feel right. What I do talk a lot about is GALE. Gremlins, assumptions, interpretations, and limiting beliefs. So bringing those, that acronym, and helping each individual understand that every single one of us comes with GALE, right? And how do we work through that? So that has been, where I've spent my time focusing with them. And we'll grow from there. But as I mentioned, it's been since November, so it's pretty new.
Now, we was just mentioned about coaching at all levels of the company, and I'm going to give you my 2 cents. Hopefully you'll understand where this comes from, but I have been a big believer in coaching since 2002. I had my first coach ever helping me see what I couldn't see, helping me identify the limiting beliefs and the doubts I had myself. And, the clarity that I got from those conversations were profound. Grew the company to millions and millions and millions. And it really set the tone for that. Now, fast forward to today, I'm continuously investing in my own coaching. I spent over $100,000 last year inside of my own development, and it was extremely expensive. And it was a large percentage of our overall revenue. I share all this with you openly because it paid off. It paid off every time. I was willing to do the work and make the commitments to make that coaching pay off. And every time it does, because I take ownership of it. Now, I bring all this up because I believe in coaching. Maybe you believe in coaching. And if you do you believe in coaching for your managers? Do you believe in helping them get more clear about what's getting in their way, more clear about where they're moving forward, or their limiting beliefs or blind spots? Well, if you believe in coaching for those people, then you want to make sure that you either hire someone like Andi to come in as a CPO and provide the level of coaching, or you find the right partner for you. We happen to do this, but maybe you want to work with a different company. One of the big things that I would urge you to think about is, playing at the next level requires an outside perspective sometimes. And you've probably noticed it in your own life. You probably noticed it with others. You're not emotionally attached. Well, a lot of the managers I'm coaching and what we bring into our programs want that level of growth and that level of transparency and honesty and real coaching, not just conversations about their career plans and conversations about skill sets, but real coaching to unlock the highest potential. Coaching really is about helping people go beyond what they can see for themselves and what they can do for themselves. So that being said, consider coaching at all levels of the company. Back to Andi and Gary. We're talking about leading without an ego and transparency. Is there anything that we haven't covered yet that you feel like is really important for us to highlight today?
Yeah, I think there is. I think it's communication is the last piece, in that I think the transparency is led by clear communication. If people are communicating with, let's get back to the word ego, with ego, the intent is wrong. People have to communicate clearly without a ulterior motive and openly. I mean, it's as if your partners on the job are your spouse, and you have to communicate clearly to build that strong relationship. If people are sending emails and people don't respond for days, that's not good communication. You need to be able to understand the urgency of everybody's priority and respect it. And I think respect, transparency, and clarity are key components to the way people need to communicate.
Andi, anything to add?
I have seen in my time at a variety of companies, it is a formula. If you don't have communication consistency, you're going to fail. Mm-hmm. You're going to fail in any relationship, right? Whether it's a romantic one or a work one. And I get to work with a team at the senior level that really respects communication. It is on us to make sure that we are teaching folks as we go down how we want to be communicated with. So one of the things I'd really like to work on is, the format of Andi, this is who I am, and this is how I like to be communicated with, and this is how you can optimize your communication with me, so that's on the agenda.
Well, we've been talking about leading without an ego. We're talking about transparency. We're talking about kind of the core foundation that makes KERV Interactive as successful as you are. So I thank you for you guys being here, telling your story and sharing your insights with our audience.
Great. Thank you for having us, Gene.
Fantastic interview. Love the fact that we talked about ego so much today and transparency. These are very big topics inside of my executive coaching. Hopefully you found the value of this and some insight. Am I saying this is all you need to know? Absolutely not. These are big concepts, and you want to make sure that you continue to lean into them. If you have any questions about this or how they apply to your current situation, your culture, your leadership, and what you're facing, make sure you reach out to me, genehammett.com. Schedule your call today. I'd love to just connect with you. When you really think about your own growth, make sure you make that a priority. Make sure you are really evolving to that next level. That's the key for you to be the kind of leader that you really want to be and that your team deserves. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, with courage. We'll see you next time.